Reddit, what's your top, holy crap, that worked moment? A guy we'll call Bob left the company I was working at. A year or two later, he started recruiting people from our company. I was interested, so I flew out for an interview. First 5 interviews went great, seemed like a good group to work with. The final interview was with the HR director. It went okay, and then we got to the pay part. I said I wanted X amount. She said the average pay for my experience and position was X minus 20K. My response was, Bob didn't fly me out here because I'm average. I have no idea why I said that, but I got the job and the pay I wanted. Months later, when we were getting drinks, Bob brought that up. Apparently, the HR director thought I was very quiet and introverted from our interview, so my response caught her even more off guard than it caught me. Used an electric palm sander to clean the soap scum out of my tub, put a sponge right on the bottom and turned that bad boy on. I thought my tub was just naturally eggshell color. It's pure white. I once got fired from a job at the grocery store. I really needed money though, and no other place was hiring. So a week later, I showed up and started doing my job as usual. No one said anything, and I got my pay at the end of the week like normal, and I stayed at that job till I quit a year later. A very confused patient was fighting me when I was trying to give him IV antibiotics. "You're going to kill me. What is my family going to do if you kill me?" he wailed while pointing at his adult son. "If I kill you, they can sue me and the hospital and be rich," I said. The man just kind of made an, "oh, yeah," kind of mumble and let me hook him up to the IV. His son was trying so hard not to laugh. I had a test coming up, and needless to say, I didn't want to take it. So 9-year-old me decides to jump out of a tree and fake being hurt. I didn't go to school for the next 2 days. I realize now that I could have just said that I fell out of a tree. I didn't actually have to do it. My first edition PS3 stopped working in 2011. I would turn it on, but it would never read a disc. About 6 months ago, I randomly found a video on YouTube with 120 views that was basically a 12-year-old kid showing how if you lift the PS3 vertically when loading a disc, it'll start to read. I tried it, and boom, that crap worked. To get out of an after-hours work event, I came up with the quickest thing I could think of and told my boss that my iguana was sick and I had to go to the pet store to pick up his medication before they closed. I don't have an iguana. The next day, I changed my desktop background to a photo of someone else's iguana. People kept asking me for weeks how my iguana was doing. Had the infamous red rings of death for an old Xbox 360 at one point. Called up a buddy. He told me to turn it off, hold it about 1.5 feet above the floor, and just drop it. I figured that I couldn't make it much worse, so I dropped it. Worked perfectly fine ever since. My first vehicle was a 1985 Dodge Ram that had around 300,000 miles on it. Needless to say, it wasn't exactly reliable. Anyway, my friend and I had tickets to go see a concert in a city that was 3 hours away. We made it there just fine and had a blast at the concert. We couldn't afford to stay overnight, so we started on the long journey home. If all went well, we would get home around 3 a.m. There was one stretch of highway where there was 60-ish miles between towns. It's pretty much the worst place to break down on that journey. There were big signs warning travelers to fill up with gas before leaving town, but I had half a tank. My truck sputtered out and died almost halfway between the 2 towns. It sounded like I ran out of gas, but the gauge still showed half a tank. All had not gone well. So there we were, 1:45 a.m., stuck on the side of the highway in Texas, 30 miles from the nearest towns. No moonlight. And this was before teenagers had cell phones. We were screwed. After a bit of poking around with a flashlight, we discovered that we did have fuel, but the fuel pump had died. We decided to sleep in the truck and mess with it in the morning. On those old Dodge trucks, the fuel pump was inside the engine instead of in the fuel tank like a modern vehicle. It was powered by the engine instead of an electric motor. Essentially, the fuel pump would constantly pump gasoline when the engine was running, and gas would always be available for the carburetor float valve. The extra pumped gas would just go back into the gas tank. I was just drifting off to sleep when I got an idea. I worked for almost an hour in the pitch dark. I used some extra hose from an agricultural fertilizer, a drink straw, screw clamps, and duct tape to rig the windshield fluid pump to pump fuel from the fuel line into the carburetor float line. I got it in my truck, hit the windshield fluid lever, and the truck started right up. It took a bit of trial and error, but I was able to get the timing down where I knew how often to hit the lever to keep the truck running. We made it back home just after 4:30 a.m. My dad wasn't immediately amused with my handiwork, but he told all of his friends how clever his son was, so I guess I passed the dad test. Halloween party during college, and everyone is just starting to pass out except this very inebriated girl who just won't shut up about wanting someone to turn off the light. I pulled the sleeping bag over her face and said, "Click." She said, "Thank you," and went to sleep. My friend and I looked at each other in amazement that it actually worked. In high school, I told a girl who was way out of my league, "You should give me your number." She asked, "Why would I do that?" I said, "Because if I just dial it randomly, it will take forever to call you." Waited to be shot down, but she laughed and gave it to me. We were together for 7 years. Mine is both a little silly and recent. I was using a trial version of a plugin suite for some software I was using. It's a trial that you can activate, or it just dies after 30 days if you use trial for the key. Contemplating buying because it was so expensive. The suite of plugins for a video editing product cost $1,000. I wasn't considering buying the $1,000 suite. I just wanted one of the plugins that comes with it that cost $400 as a standalone. As I was contemplating, I started poking around for tutorials. I found one by the author. It was a complete tutorial including the license activation. During the video, he showed how to enter the code. I thought, there's no way, screw it, I'm gonna try it. I paused the video, wrote down the number he used in the video, and clicked activate. It activated the entire suite. One time a bird got caught in our chimney, and while me and my roommate discussed how to get it out, he suggested we stick our hand up there and the bird would just land on our finger. I laughed at him and said it would never work. Within 30 seconds, he was walking to the door with a bird perched on his pointer finger. Not me, but my uncle. Back in the 70s, he created a group in high school with 10 of his buddies called the Maple Leaf Work Club. Every Friday during the morning announcement on the intercom, the school principal was inviting every member of the Maple Leaf Work Club to meet at 2 p.m. at the usual classroom. The usual classroom was the bar next door. They did this for 4 years. My son was living nearby and had locked himself out of his room. He called me for help. During my many assignments in the military, I was once stationed with a guy who was also a locksmith, incessantly told me about locks, lockpicks, tumblers, etc. So I showed up at my son's apartment, armed with a basic knowledge about how locks work and 2 paper clips. I half straightened them out, used one to flick the tumblers, and the other to pull the bottom of the lock to turn it. 2 minutes later, I was in. My son says, "Holy crap, you did it." Got serious dad points for that one. Edit. Was years ago, way before YouTube. When I was younger, I was into magic and thought I invented a magic trick that used subliminal messaging to get someone to pick a card. I secretly turned the 2 of hearts over in the deck and handed it to the kid my mom was watching. I asked my mom to name any card, then I said to the kid, "You too, name of kid, whatever card is in your heart," trying to get him to say 2 of hearts. To my disbelief, he actually said 2 of freaking hearts. I didn't touch the deck for the entire trick and told him to go through it, and he saw his selection turned over. I was in just as much amazement as he was. In school, I belatedly realized I had an essay due the next day, which I simply didn't have time to do. What I did have time to do was write slightly more than a page. I then printed out only the first, full page and handed this inside a plastic wallet. I then finished the essay at home that night. So, the next day when my teacher grabs me in the corridor and says, "You realize you only gave me the first page of your essay, right?" I was able to say, "Oh shoot, the rest must have fallen out or something. I'll go print it out right now and bring it to your office." Once upon a time in Iraq, my tank's fire control system fricked up. We couldn't shoot stuff. The mechanic did some troubleshooting, busted out a can of soda, tore off the little piece of aluminum that gets punched when you crack it open, and wedged the aluminum piece into some electrical component in the tank. The gun started working again. I once showed up 8 hours late for work. My company was trying out this crazy 3-shift schedule that would change every day, but there was no order to the scheme. If you didn't check what the manager put out that day, no one knew when they should be at work the next day. So after a hard shift, I forget to check that bad boy. And when I came in the next day expecting to arrive at the shift change, everyone was at their desks working away. Someone sees me and asks, "Hey, did you get moved to this shift?" I picked up a clipboard and said, "No, just here to inspect." I spent about 10 minutes walking around the office, just nodding or scribbling notes before I went home. Not only did I not work that day, one of the managers thought it was awesome that someone was checking up on projects. Was going home on my bike at night. My front light was broken and there was a police check. The officer told me I was getting a ticket because I didn't have the light on. I told him it was on. He pointed at the light and said it was off. I told him it was off because it works on a dynamo and the wheels have to be turning for it to go on, and suggested I'd show it. He agreed, so I got on my bike and drove off. I was hiking with a friend, and a bobcat crossed our path about 30 yards ahead of us. My friend turned around and went, "Oh crap," and began to run, at which point the cat started running straight at me. I put my hands up in the air and yelled like, "Blah!" and it stopped to a skid and ran the other direction.